KTNA, experts in apprenticeships, traineeships and work-based training.
Hello and welcome to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent with me, Chris Price. Joining me this week are business advisor Dr. Wayne Wright and Jerry Biggs, Chief Executive of technology investor NCL. In today's show, we've spoken to Labour's Shadow Minister Bill Esterson on a visit to Kent following the release of the government's industrial strategy this week. We're also looking at plans to boost skills in the county with a Kent and Medway Medical School, as two universities put in a joint bid for government cash to fund places for 100 students. First, we have news which broke this morning about the wholesaler Palmer and Harvey, which has tumbled into administration with the immediate loss of 2,500 jobs. P&H had been hit by difficult trading conditions in recent months, and efforts to restructure the business failed. The company has two sites in Kent at Aylesford and Larkfield. The business has committed to pay all staff for their work this month. It employs 3,400 people overall. P&H is the UK's largest wholesaler to the UK convenience market, and its administration has disrupted the supply chains of various retailers across the country. Gents, it's always sad when you hear news like this, but the impact of P&H governance administration is obviously affects the staff, but actually affects a heck of a lot of businesses who rely on the supply chain. I mean, how do businesses react when you have such a huge supplier unable to actually service you anymore?
Well, I suppose generally, thanks, Jerry. It's very difficult in terms of how to manage that at a moment in time. Sometimes you get a glimpse of those things happening before. Supply issues and other things that are happening leading up to potentially the news administration happens. So sometimes you get a wind of what's happening, so sometimes you can have the opportunity to react accordingly. But in most cases it is very, very difficult, and having to ensure that you bolster your supply chain as well. But most businesses, to be fair, will have additional suppliers in place anyway. So hopefully those arrangements will be in place, will be secured to bolster any additional shortfalls in any retail stock going forward.
It should be said that the Competition Markets Authority very recently approved a deal for Tesco to take over Booker, one of P&H's biggest rivals, and now that deal is being brought into question because Booker is actually going to have an even bigger share than what it would have done in the first place. I mean, was it right for that deal to go through?
I think hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it, really? And that's the problem. When you have to think through at a time like that, what effect is that going to have on the next company along? And obviously it has had some effect. We can't tell how much on that particular company itself. But it's there for a reason. It's there to look at competition and takeovers and mergers, and it's done the right job. It's just that the effect is that one of the companies as a result of that has gone down.
Sure. Gents, thanks very much for your thoughts on that. Small businesses had the chance to pitch their grievances to the Labour Shadow Business Minister today on a tour of Medway, where he grew up. Bill Esterson talked to bosses about the business rate reforms, taxing big corporations and Kent's role in Britain's future trading relationship with the EU. Louisa Britton reports.
These office spaces bring together a variety of local businesses here in Medway since it opened in the summer. Dragon Co-working hosts individual small businesses in an innovative space where they can network and collaborate. Today, former Medway councillor and now Labour's Shadow Minister for Innovation and Skills visited the premises to support what he called the heart of our economy.
It's Small Business Saturday this weekend, and I want to support small firms across the country, and particularly in this area where I grew up. But they are the backbone of our economy, and if we're going to be successful in the future, we've got to support them. We've got to make sure that the smallest firms can be successful, that they have the broadband, that they have the road and rail infrastructure they need, that they've got the skilled young people coming through our education system so that they can be successsible.
In the UK, there are 5 million businesses that employ fewer than 10 people.
They're absolutely crucial to this country to get us moving forward, to get the economy moving and push forward as well. It's the small businesses that really drive us. It's not these large companies, it's the small ones. It's these little people working today on their bedroom desk, in the kitchen.
But with Brexit planned for early 2019, many of these small businesses have concerns and anxieties about the future of the UK's economy and how their enterprises could fit into it.
Focusing completely on skills, I think I work in an area where the skills are lacking here, and those skills have been, the need for those skills has been filled by people who come in from other countries, who can easily come in from Europe. I think if those skills start to disappear, then we are going to have a worse skills problem than we have already.
I'm just really worried. I mean, with a focus so much on Brexit, people need to take their eye off what's really important, and what's really important is to get these small businesses, to help them, to push them forward, to get them set up and starting, because these are the guys that are going to be paying the taxes in the future. So whatever happens with Brexit, we've still got to keep our eye on the ball with these smaller companies.
Although these businesses may have uncertainties about the next few years, research published early this month does show resilience in the SME sector, with 1/3 of companies identifying themselves as in a growth phase. This is Louisa Britton for KMTV in Chatham.
Okay, so we heard Mr. Esterson there saying that small businesses need broadband, rail infrastructure, businesses need skilled young people. Is that a reasonable wish list, and are we giving businesses what they need at the moment?
Well, I think they're always going to need those particular items, and as we get more businesses and more startups growing, they're going to need them more and more. The critical factor that we need, especially if we're looking to an industrial strategy which is bringing in high-tech companies and making high-tech companies start up, then it's a big deficit of capital to support those enterprises as they grow, and that's really where we need to be looking. So the patient capital review, how we can start the venture capital process for more longevity in our investments to help those businesses flourish in the future.
Do you feel confident? Mr. Esterson there says that businesses should be confident in a Labour government to try and improve things for small businesses. Do you guys feel confident when he puts forward their candidacy?
That's really for the Labour Party to answer for. I think the key things about the detail of what that looks like. It's easy to put platitudes or big themes and big terms, but as you well know, broadband availability, especially in the UK, is very, very, very scattered. Especially in the rural side, and Kent has a big rural element. A lot of small businesses are based rurally or in the home environment, and as you well know, the take up and also the speed element is incredibly poor. It's abysmal. So unless this existing government and Labour government are really address the detail of how they can work that out, then again it's just pure words at the moment. Okay,
very quickly, one of the businesses in Louisa's report mentions concerns over access to skills when we leave the EU. How long is it going to take to get the skilled people we need if we do start having trouble once Brexit happens?
I think it's the right skills for your new economy going forward, and the government's outlining its strategy for it is moving into a high-tech environment, and we need high-tech skills, and that certainly comes from the US and Asia, and we've got to look after our home with the farmers and things as well to make sure we get the right manual work as well. So it's a mix of both.
It's good that you mentioned the industrial strategy there. I mean, this week the government did publish its industrial strategy for growth. The document set out plans for £725 million to capitalise the value of innovation, it said, over the next 3 years. This includes £170 million to transform the construction sector and £210 million to develop precision medicine. The government aims to increase investment in research and development from 1.7% to 2.4% of GDP by 2027. Business Secretary Greg Clark, who's the MP for Tunbridge Wells, said this could lead to about £80 billion of extra investment in advanced technology in the next decade. He also said he wants to invest an additional £406 million in maths, digital and technical education. Do you feel, we asked Shadow Business Minister, Mr. Esterson, what he thought of the strategy?
They've got to put the investment into road, into rail freight, into improving our broadband. We're only 19th in the world for broadband, and we're the 7th biggest economy. That's not good enough. We've got to make sure that we have the technical skills that our employers need to compete internationally. There's not enough in the strategy about that. There's nothing about smaller businesses, which is what today is all about, and that's not good enough.
Okay, so Mr. Esterson's not convinced there, but are you guys?
I think the government has a good focus. Innovation is really key in relation to businesses. We work with a high number of what I call high growth businesses, businesses whether in the tech or creative industries. And we always say, you need to push for innovation. You need to look for the next thing that's going to differentiate you as a business through to your competition.
Why is
really
tech the key focus for the government at the minute?
I think we've been passed over by many different sectors as they emerge. And the key question for us as the UK, especially going through Brexit, is do we want to be a leader or a laggard? And we've got to be a leader in this next industrial revolution, and it is tech-focused. And that's where we need to be. So it's getting the right skills, the right capital, and the right firm base to help that move forward.
I think there's also, Chris, but I think there's also an understanding that Britain has been historically and heritage-wise, a leader in terms of pioneering, new IP, new innovation around the world, really. So it's really just maintaining that focus.
Very, very quickly, is there enough in there for the regions, for places like Kent? Do these big figures sometimes focus nationally, but not enough on local areas?
I think it's really important that the region shouts loudly at a time like this. You've got to pull yourself together as a region and show what you've got. So showing your medical assets off, your new schools, everything that you can do to support this new economy moving forward, and that's how you'll get recognised.
Sure.
I think also you find as well is that some of the money is allocated to what they call the Golden Triangle, Cambridge, Oxford and London. So absolutely, we've got to shout loud.
Thanks very much for your thoughts on that, guys. Coming up, the mission for money for medical students and raspberries going rotten as farmers plea for pickets. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent, where I'm joined by business consultant Wayne Wright and science and tech investor Jerry Biggs. 2 universities in Kent have joined forces in a bid to train more medical students in the county. Officials said it could transform medical provision in the region. Josie Hannett reports.
The joint bid for government cash has been submitted by the University of Kent and Canterbury Christ Church University. If successful, they say they could fund 100 degree places for medical students. It's all part of their plans to establish a Kent and Medway medical school. They hope the first students will be taking courses by 2020, and the universities think there is a reasonable chance of success given the government's commitment to pay for an extra 1,500 medical student places by that year. The University of Kent's Vice-Chancellor is Karen Cox, and she told KMTV she believes that the school would have a positive outcome for Kent.
I'd like to think that if 22 million was spent on this, that it would make a massive difference for the county. It would absolutely, I think, transform health services here. We know that areas that do not have a medical school really are challenged in terms of their workforce, both recruiting a workforce and retaining a workforce. We know that if you put in an intervention like a medical school, that can transform that, as well as transform the health outcomes for the people who live nearby and use those local health services. So we're really keen to get this going. We think we've got something that will make a difference, and I think that 22 million as part of that overall solution is really going to be the difference that means that we do something or we don't do something. So we're really keen to get this off the ground.
OK, so money there for medical students in the county. People obviously think of doctors and the like, but actually, how much of these skills that they're going to be trained for going to be applicable to areas of business in Kent? Are they what sort of areas are they going to be allowing the county to thrive?
Yeah.
Life sciences?
Well, I think definitely in the life sciences area, and we were saying earlier on that as a county we need to come together and show all of the things we've got to create that clustering effect around life science, and that'll really put us on the map. And you don't do that unless you've got a medical school producing A-grade doctors and nurses and other components of that system that's needed. So for Kent to have that is absolutely paramount if we want to get onto this next part of the industrial strategy.
Karen Cox, the Vice-Chancellor, speaking on KMTV earlier this week, she mentions £22 million, which the university needs to raise independently as well in its aspiration to open a medical school. I mean, do you think businesses be queuing up to support them on that ambition?
I think only if there's a natural path that they see for those students. If the students are purely going into the NHS, or private enterprises, in terms of medical private medical practices, then potentially not. So there needs to be probably a bit more holistic approach in terms of saying that it's not just doctors we're creating scientists who have a medical background experience, because a lot of the companies that we're seeing down in Discovery Park, over in the US, are utilising those with medical skills background to be able to facilitate new technology advances.
Yeah, so thinking of the NHS, but also its potential applications in other sectors is key.
Very much so. And if you've got thriving life science businesses, they need these staff that have been very well trained and spent time in the medical system. So being able to have a school that can train them right from the grassroots, but have leading companies around them that are breaking the edge of technology and medical advances also helps that ecosystem survive.
Brilliant. Guys, thanks very much for your thoughts on that. Now with news of protests over a print firm, a vineyard vying for vacationers and a schoolboy waffle seller with a special anniversary. Here's Cameron Tucker with this week's Business Roundup.
Workers' Union Unite has criticised bosses of a historic printing firm which closed suddenly last week, saying staff are still unaware if they'll be getting paid. Administrators are poised to be appointed at Stones Ashford, formed after the takeover of Headley Brothers, one of Kent's oldest printing companies. The troubled firm was sold to Oxfordshire print business Henry Stones hours after tumbling into administration in March, in a deal which rescued 113 jobs. In a shock move, the Ashford business closed less than 2 weeks ago. Winemaker Hush Heath Estates is increasing its activity in the pub market after signing a deal with the UK's largest bar company. The winery, which has vineyards near Staplehurst, is launching Hush Heath Inns in a joint venture with EI Managed Investments, which owns more than 4,500 properties, for the large part run as leased and tenanted boozers. Its first site will be the Ship Inn in Rye, East Sussex, adding to 4 pubs it already owns, 3 linked with boutique hotels. And a Kent schoolboy celebrated the first anniversary of setting up his own business. Lewis Ing is not yet old enough to open his own bank account or learn to drive, but the 14-year-old has proudly celebrated a year at the helm of the Bubble Waffle Company. Lewis, who is the youngest registered entrepreneur at the Kent Foundation, decided to open his street food business after being inspired by traders he met while holidaying with his family in Hong Kong and Vietnam. He's catered for 19 events, the most successful being West Farleigh Fireworks Night this month.
OK, so it's terrible news there in the bulletin there about Stones Ashford. Now with P&H, where they've gone into administration today, they've said that they committed to paying the wages of workers. That's not, it appears, being the case with Stones Ashford. Should there be more in business plans or more protections for workers? Should businesses be obliged to pay staff even when they go bust?
Absolutely, as part of the administration process, that's the whole idea, to ring fence any additional cash that's in the business to do that, to pay creditors as well as the workers as well. But I do agree that there should be some additional protection, because the time that it takes for that cash to be released is sometimes quite long. So, generally you've got workers, a month, 2 months before some of the government protection schemes kick in, etc., receiving any sort of funds whatsoever. So some sort of emergency workers' funds would really help.
Sure.
People in those instances.
Absolutely. Very quickly, we've just got to say a little word there about Louis Inge. 14, he's a schoolboy. He's been in business for a year.
Fantastic.
I mean, is that what how do we sort of capture more young people to think of business in this way?
Absolutely. I mean, what more could you want? And I'm sure he'll franchise it in a couple of years' time and be a multi-millionaire.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be covering him more.
Absolutely.
Now, moving on, a Kent farm has been forced to dump tons of raspberries after struggling to find enough pickers. Bosses blame the waste on Britain's impending departure from the European Union, which has made finding people to pick the fruit more difficult. Louisa Britton has more.
Fruit and vegetable growers across the county could be suffering from a sharp decrease in seasonal workers from European Union nations after the Brexit vote. Employees from countries such as Bulgaria and Romania make up most of the workforce here at Oakdean Farm. They pick and pack soft fruits such as raspberries and blackberries before the harvest gets transported to shops, including our local supermarkets. But farmers are struggling to recruit and retain their workforce as uncertainty over a post-Brexit Britain seems to be making it a much less attractive place for workers from the EU. Well, the main fruit picking season might be over for 2017 and the raspberry plants here have been covered over for the winter. But according to this farm not far from Maidstone, it's becoming more and more difficult to recruit seasonal labour, something that many fruit farms rely on heavily. The National Farmers Union estimates that Britain's farms were almost 30% short of migrant labourers in September. And earlier this year, this fruit farm left up to 150 tonnes of raspberries to rot on the bushes as there were too few labourers to pick the produce.
We probably lost an income somewhere around about at least $250,000. The beginning of the year, we were definitely suffering from the Brexit effect, where people didn't really want to come because they weren't too sure what they'd expect. By the time they decided to come, we had already lost crops because of this delay in getting people to come. But we're finding that whereas normally we would have people leaving and booking their place for next year, they're playing their cards tight to their chest and they're not committing.
Each year, the UK needs about 80,000 seasonal workers to harvest fruit and vegetables, and there are fears worker shortages could cause supply chain disruption in 2018.
99% of them is the exchange rate, is the saving money and taking money back to their own country, which is important. They don't want to live in the UK. They want to go back, so exchange rates are key to everything.
But growers are trying to attract new workers, and Tim Chambers is planning a trip to Bulgaria this weekend to meet potential recruits face to face. Even so, growers seem to be bracing for more severe shortages next year, along with the possibility that a good portion of their produce could rot before it gets picked. This is Louisa Britton for KMTV.
OK, we're hearing more and more stories of farmers struggling to get hold of pickers, that kind of thing, and losing money. I mean, is there any danger that farmers are starting to use the impending Brexit as a bit of an excuse, perhaps, for poor performance in any cases?
I think there's a combination of factors there, and certainly I think that there may be some element of that as well going on, because as a business, you need to mitigate the risk. So clearly, if you know you're going to be short, then you need to be, taking appropriate actions to do that. And I think it's for businesses to be smarter, really to be smarter in that time. I don't know the ins and outs of the situation there, and clearly they've had some issues. But even where I live, in the rural part of Kent, sure, the guys have been okay. Sure. So again, we need to be careful that we can blame Brexit on all things.
Before we go, we just have time for our number of the week. And this week's number is 25. It's a stressful one. That's the number of shopping days left until Christmas. Obviously, that figure may be different if you're watching the repeat or online, which is potentially even more stressful. Guys, have you done any of your Christmas shopping?
No.
That's what Christmas Eve's for.
Is that right? OK. I thought high-powered business people were more organised than this.
No, my wife is.
Absolutely. Fair enough. OK, that's it for the latest edition of Chris & Co, our show looking at the issues affecting business in Kent. You can keep up to date with all the county's latest business news at kentbusiness.co.uk. And you can follow us on Twitter at KentBusiness and join our pages on Facebook and LinkedIn. But for now, thanks very much for watching. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
KTNA, experts in apprenticeships, traineeships and work-based training.